The great hall of Rathkal floated high above the molten oceans of the planet Kasher. Its tall towers of glass and light reflected the fiery red skies, casting shimmering colors on the faces of those gathered inside. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and strange minerals from the world below. Delegates from 12 of the most powerful alien species in the Intergalactic Alliance filled the room, their voices humming together like a chorus of many languages. Tall, Kiri, with feathers that shifted colors, whispered to the crystalline Vathari, who glowed faintly in the light. The Rivik, creatures covered in shining hard plates, stood in groups, their many eyes scanning the crowd with suspicion. Among them all, the humans sat quietly, small in number and plainly dressed. 5 officers in simple navy uniforms, their skin pale compared to the rich colors of the others, and their faces full of nervous energy. Captain Elias Ward sat straight in his chair, shoulders tense. Around him, whispers and quiet laughter rose like waves. He had heard every word. They break bones in their own gravity. A Kyrian delegate muttered to a nearby Vathari. Fragile skin, soft organs, hissed a Vathari scientist. How can they survive the heat of battle? Elias stared forward, hands clenched on the polished wood table. He remembered Earth, his homeworld, a blue and green planet where humanity had fought to survive through ice ages, storms, and wars. They were called fragile now, but Elias knew better. Humans were stubborn, unyielding, and full of surprises. A voice boomed through the hall. It was the Rivek General Cracksdale, his thick exoskeleton gleaming in the light. "We face a threat unlike any before," Cracksdale said, voice deep and rough. "The Orcs swarm, a devouring enemy that consumes entire worlds. We must send our strongest fleets, the largest, the toughest, the most advanced." He turned, his many eyes toward the human delegation. "The Terrans," he said with a sneer, "are unprepared and too fragile. They will remain in reserve, where their weakness cannot harm us." A ripple of laughter followed. Elias rose slowly, heart pounding but voice steady. "I may be new to this council, General, but I warn you, judging strength by size or armor alone is a mistake." The hall quieted, eyes turning sharply to him. Cracksdale's mandibles clicked in annoyance. "And what would you suggest?" "Human." Elias met the Rivek's many eyes without fear. "Give us a chance. We may be fragile, but we are fast. We adapt. We fight differently. Underestimate us, and you may find yourself wrong." Council Leader Vessa, a towering Vathari elder with shimmering translucent skin, raised her hand. "Enough, Captain Ward. The decision has been made. The humans will remain on the sidelines while the great fleets face the Orcs." Elias felt the weight of the moment. He sat back down, fighting the fire inside. Behind him, Lieutenant Arya Chen, young and determined, whispered, "They don't see us as equals yet, but they will." Outside the hall, the molten ocean glowed, brighter as the sun dipped below the horizon. Across the stars, the Orc swarm was already moving, devouring all in its path. Elias looked to the viewport. The stars beyond seemed smaller than before, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "We are fragile," he thought, "but we are not broken. If you want, I can continue writing the next parts, similarly with rich detail, suspense, and emotional moments. Would you like me to proceed with part 2 next?" "You said, part 2 words, 900k, leko, or interesting, huna cheya, or third-person style, ma lekniha, or simple basic English, k paragraph ma, proper emotional, are attractive hochat GPT," said certainly. "Here is part 2 of the aliens, said you're too fragile." Then the humans arrived in third person. Simple English, around 900 words, emotionally engaging and vivid. Part 2. The first losses. The news came swiftly, like a cold wind that no one could stop. The Orcs swarm, the devouring force the Council had feared, had broken through the outer defenses of the Spherian Belt, from the secure command rooms on distant worlds. Holofeats flickered with images too terrible to believe. Massive cities burned under silver storms, made of millions of tiny machines. The metallic swarm crawled over the land like a living flood, stripping away everything in its path. Buildings crumbled as if made of paper. Forests turned to ash. Oceans boiled beneath the relentless advance. Entire continents vanished beneath a wave of cold, precise destruction. Commander Rhea Holt stared at the holographic display aboard the UN's Valiant. Her jaw was tight, her eyes sharp with frustration. Around her, the human crew worked quickly, but the tension was thick in the air. "They're adapting faster than we can fight," Rhea said quietly. "Every time we think we've stopped one wave, another comes in a new form. The swarm learns. It changes." Elias Ward stood beside her, silent but tense. He watched the holograms shift, fleets of massive alien warships, their weapons firing in desperate volleys, being overwhelmed by an enemy that seemed endless. "They expected us to be too fragile to fight," Elias said, voice low. "Maybe. They were wrong." The UN's Valiant was one of the smaller ships in the Alliance fleet, built for flexibility and speed rather than heavy firepower. The large Rivok dreadnoughts and Kyrian carrier swarms had been sent to meet the swarm head-on. But the Orcs moved like a tide, never ceasing, always pressing forward. Lena Ashford, the human science officer, joined the briefing. Her brow furrowed as she tapped the holographic controls. "The Orcs don't have a central intelligence, like we thought. They operate more like a hive, but each swarm learns slowly from the others. Their evolution is not instant." Rhea nodded. "That means, if we strike fast enough, in the right places, we can slow them down. We just need to be smarter." The other commanders in the room exchanged worried glances. Many had already written humanity off as too weak, too slow, to make a difference. But the humans, faced with overwhelming odds, began to plan differently. The UN's Valiant and its fleet were ordered to conduct evacuations and supply runs in the war-torn sectors, staying behind the larger fleets. But Elias and Rhea saw an opportunity in their missions. The swarm's pattern was breaking. There was a rhythm to its attacks. During one supply run, they intercepted Oryx communication signals, strange, clicking pulses that suggested coordination, but with a delay. Rhea leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "They don't respond instantly. Their adaptation takes time." Elias smiled faintly. "That's our advantage. Speed and unpredictability." The human ships began to test the swarm's limits. They performed rapid warp jumps, striking supply depots and small fabrication centers hidden deep inside enemy territory. Their attacks were sudden, chaotic, and confusing to the Orcs. One night, aboard the bridge of the Valiant, Rhea looked out at the stars. "The others see us as fragile," she said softly, "but they don't understand how dangerous that makes us." Elias nodded. "When you know how easily you can break, you fight with everything you have." Back on Vrathkel, the council debated the losses. Some blamed the weak spots in their defenses. Others demanded more heavy weapons and stricter command. The humans' role remained minor, their methods unconventional and dismissed, but the humans kept striking. Every time the Orcs shifted tactics, the humans shifted faster. They tested new weapons, EMP bombs that blinded the swarm's sensors, fast missile pods that pierced the swarm's edges, and clever electronic warfare that scrambled enemy coordination. The UN's Valiant took damage. Several ships were lost, but every success bought the Alliance precious time. Elias gathered his officers. "We're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting to prove that being fragile doesn't mean being weak." Lieutenant Arya Chen looked at him, determination burning in her eyes. "We'll show them what humanity can do." As the silver storms of the Orcs continued their deadly march, humanity prepared to push deeper into the heart of the swarm. They were fragile, yes, but they were far from finished. The UN's Valiant glided silently through the cold darkness of space, its dark hull reflecting distant stars like tiny diamonds. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge, watching the endless blackness with sharp eyes. The crew moved around him, tense but focused. They had been through much: losses, close calls, and battles against a swarm that seemed unstoppable. Commander Rhea Holt leaned over the sensor console, her face lit by the soft glow of holographic data. "We're picking up something new," she said. "The Orcs don't coordinate like we thought. They don't have one central brain controlling them." Elias frowned. "How do they coordinate?" Rhea tapped a series of commands. "It's more like a hive, many small intelligence nodes spread throughout the swarm. They communicate with each other, but slowly. It takes time for them to learn from each attack and change their strategy." The others in the room exchanged looks. This was important. The swarm's strength was in its numbers, but its weakness was in its slow adaptation. "We can use that," Elias said quietly. "Hit them hard and fast before they change. Outrun their learning." Lena Ashford, the ship's lead scientist, joined the discussion. Her calm voice carried the weight of experience. "Exactly. They evolve, yes, but not instantly. We've tested their reaction times. When we attacked the supply hubs yesterday, their countermeasures arrived nearly 10 minutes too late." Rhea smiled for the first time in days. "That's our opening." For weeks, the human fleet began moving differently from the rest of the Alliance. While the larger fleets engaged the swarm head-on, humans used hit-and-run tactics. The Un's Valiant glided silently through the cold darkness of space, its dark hull reflecting distant stars like tiny diamonds. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge, watching the endless blackness with sharp eyes. The crew moved around him, tense but focused. They had been through much losses, close calls, and battles against a swarm that seemed unstoppable. Commander Rhea Holt leaned over the sensor console, her face lit by the soft glow of holographic data. "We're picking up something new," she said. "The Orcs don't coordinate like we thought. They don't have one central brain controlling them." Elias frowned. "How do they coordinate?" Rhea tapped a series of commands. "It's more like a hive, many small intelligence nodes spread throughout the swarm. They communicate with each other, but slowly. It takes time for them to learn from each attack and change their strategy." The others in the room exchanged looks. This was important. The swarm's strength was in its numbers, but its weakness was in its slow adaptation. "We can use that," Elias said quietly. "Hit them hard and fast before they change. Outrun their learning." Lena Ashford, the ship's lead scientist, joined the discussion. Her calm voice carried the weight of experience. "Exactly. They evolve, yes, but not instantly. We've tested their reaction times. When we attacked the supply hubs yesterday, their countermeasures arrived nearly 10 minutes too late." Rhea smiled for the first time in days. "That's our opening." For weeks, the human fleet began moving differently from the rest of the Alliance. While the larger fleets engaged the swarm head-on, humans used hit-and-run tactics. They darted in with sudden warp jumps, striking small but critical targets deep inside Orcs territory. Their ships were smaller, their weapons less powerful, but they were faster and more unpredictable. Human pilots changed course without warning, used unusual attack patterns, and launched EMP shadow bombs that blanked the swarm's sensors for crucial minutes. "Let them chase the big ships," Elias said during a meeting with his officers. "We'll be the ones who slip through the cracks." Lieutenant Arya Chen nodded. "We're not the strongest, but we're the smartest. That counts." The humans' tactics began to work. Reports came in from all parts of the battlefront. The Orcs swarms slowed, their attacks less coordinated. The large fabrication hubs that produced nanite drones were disrupted. Entire waves of attack never arrived, but the cost was high. The UN's Valiant took damage. A small frigate was lost in a daring attack, and every strike left the crew exhausted and tense. In one quiet moment aboard the Valiant, Elias walked through the corridors, seeing the tired faces of his crew. A young engineer, tired but determined, looked up at him. "Captain," she said softly, "they think we're fragile. But maybe that's why we fight this way. We know what we stand to lose." Elias smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in weeks. "That's why we never give up." In the command room, the human officers gathered around a holographic map of the battlefield. The Orcs spread like a black stain, devouring system after system. But holes were forming, small spaces where the swarm had been pushed back or confused. Lena pointed to one area. "There's a cluster of intelligence nodes inside that asteroid field. If we can destroy that nexus, we could break their command network." Ria's voice was steady. "That would cripple the swarm here, maybe even stop them." The others were silent. The plan was dangerous. The asteroid fortress was heavily shielded, surrounded by millions of drones ready to swarm any attackers. "All the experts say it's suicide," Elias said quietly. "But it's the only way." Lieutenant Chen looked at him. "They say we're fragile. But maybe fragile things don't break, they bend and fight back." Outside the Valiant, stars streaked past as the ship prepared to jump into the heart of enemy space. The crew knew the risk, but no one turned away. They were the fragile ones, but also the dangerous ones. The UNS Valiant and her small fleet slipped through the cold darkness of space, far beyond the front lines. Their mission was clear: strike at the heart of the Orc swarm, disrupt their command center, and give the Alliance a fighting chance. But this was a secret mission, unapproved by the Council. The humans acted on their own. Captain Elias Ward sat quietly in the command chair, his gaze steady on the vast starfield before them. Around him, the crew worked swiftly, checking and rechecking every system. The Valiant was smaller and less armed than the massive dreadnoughts that marched boldly into battle, but it had speed and cunning. Lieutenant Arya Chen tapped her fingers on the console. "Our jump coordinates are set. We're going dark. No transmissions unless absolutely necessary." Elias nodded. "We move like shadows." The rest of the fleet, 8 smaller frigates, followed the Valiant with silent determination. None of them would admit it aloud, but each officer knew they were betting everything on this dangerous gambit. No one outside the human fleet believed their plan would work. The Council had refused to send reinforcements. The Rivak generals. Words echoed in their minds. "They're too fragile to face the real fight." But the humans did not see themselves as fragile. They saw their world's long history, rising from ruin, adapting to impossible challenges, surviving when everything said they shouldn't. They remembered the fire in their hearts. The fleet reached the edge of Orcs territory, where jagged asteroids floated like silent graves. The enemy's fortress was nestled among the largest rocks, a cluster of glowing energy fields and armored walls that shimmered in space. The Valiant's sensors showed the swarm's relentless guards, millions of silver nanite drones buzzing like angry hornets. Elias looked at the bridge crew. "This is it. We go in fast, we hit hard, and we get out before they know what hit them." Lena Ashford, the scientist who had designed their electronic warfare tools, loaded the first set of EMP shadow bombs. "These will blind their sensors for critical minutes. Use it wisely." The fleet slipped closer, disguised as crippled freighters. Drifting slowly, the Orcs scanning drones passed by, uninterested. The humans had studied their patterns, slow, cautious, expecting no real threat in such feeble ships. Suddenly, the lead frigate exploded in a flash of plasma fire, revealing hidden missile pods and plasma cannons. The small fleet roared to life. The battle was close and brutal. The Valiant danced among the asteroids, weaving through enemy fire. The shadows of exploding drones lit up the void like sparks in a storm. Hull alarms blared as a nanite cluster broke through one ship's armor. Crew members fought against surging heat and sudden loss of gravity. On the bridge, Elias felt the ship shudder. The weight of the fight pressed on every nerve. "Hold formation," he shouted. "Keep moving. Use the shadows." The human marines moved with desperate precision. Unlike other species that relied on strength or overwhelming power, humans used speed and chaos. Their attacks were unpredictable, confusing the swarm's automatic defenses. Rhea Holt, commanding one of the frigates, barked orders. "Target the energy shields. Fire the shadow bombs." The shadows blossomed in bursts of dark energy, scrambling the swarm's sensors. For precious moments, the Orcs drones flailed, blind and confused. The humans pushed forward. Leif Anderson, the Valiant's engineer, worked furiously to keep systems online. "We're losing power in the port thrusters. Patch it, now." Despite the chaos, the humans pressed their advantage. They reached the fortress's outer shell, thick, glowing barriers that hummed with energy. "Prepare to breach," Elias ordered. "This is where the real fight begins." The crew braced as the first plasma torpedoes tore into the shield. The fortress trembled but held. More weapons fired. The shield weakened, flickering like a dying flame. Inside the Valiant, the ship's lights flickered. Crew members gritted their teeth as they fought to stay calm. Elias looked around at their faces, young, tired, but filled with fierce determination. They were fragile, yes, but their will was unbreakable. As the shield cracked, the humans readied for the next step, a desperate push to the very heart of the Orcs hive. No one had believed they would make it this far, but the humans were far from finished. The Un's Valiant shook violently as the plasma torpedoes struck the fortress's shield. Outside the viewport, energy rippled and flared, like a terrible storm trapped in glass. The hum of the shield faltered, but the barrier held firm. "Captain." Elias Ward gripped the edge of the command console. His voice was low but sharp. "We have one chance to break through. Fire everything we have." Lieutenant Arya Chen's fingers flew over the controls, launching graviton torpedoes in 5, 4, 3. Lena Ashford, the scientist, watched the tactical readouts with tense eyes. "These graviton torpedoes aren't standard. They create small artificial gravity wells, the kind that can tear through shield generators if placed right." Rhea Holt nodded, her face hard. "If we can collapse their shields, even for a moment, we can get inside." The Valiant's torpedoes sped forward, glowing faintly with swirling energy. They impacted the fortress's shield in a pulse that warped the very fabric of space around it. The shield flickered violently, then cracked. "Breach successful," Chen shouted. The fleet pushed through the gap like a blade slicing into silk. Space inside the fortress was a maze of rocky corridors, energy pylons, and twisting tunnels lined with glowing cables. The Orcs swarm attacked in waves. Nanite clouds swarmed the ships, tiny silver blades flashing as they sliced through armor and glass. Alarms screamed aboard every human vessel. The bridge lights flickered as power surged and waned. Engineers rushed to repair damaged systems, but the humans fought harder. Elias barked orders. "Keep moving. Don't let them surround us." Rhea commanded the Marines, who boarded smaller enemy vessels, fighting hand-to-hand with creatures made of shifting metal and liquid. Their armor was light, but their training was fierce. Every movement was precise, every strike calculated. "Remember," Rhea said, overcomes. "We're fragile, but we're not weak. We fight with our minds and our hearts." On the Valiant, Leif Anderson worked feverishly to keep the gravity generators stable. His fingers flew over the consoles as the ship shuddered from nearby explosions. Suddenly, a warning light flashed red. "Nanite cluster detected in the aft engine," he shouted. "They're eating through the armor." Elias's heart sank, but his voice stayed firm. "Divert all power to aft shields. Engineers, hold the line." The crew moved like a single organism, repairing and fighting. They knew that failure meant death, but they refused to give in. Inside, The control core of the fortress, a web of glowing cables pulsed like veins. It was the brain of the swarm in this sector, a cluster of high-intelligence nodes, guiding millions of drones. Elias knew destroying it would mean breaking the swarm's power here. Lena's fingers danced across her tablet. I have a virus ready, a layered signal noise that will scramble their commands and confuse their hive mind. The plan was risky. The virus had to be uploaded directly inside the control chamber. The Marines would have to fight through. To reach it, Elias made the call. Prepare the boarding teams. This ends here. The Marines suited up in lightweight armor. They were not genetically enhanced, not biologically stronger, but they were trained to be quick, clever, and to use every advantage. They launched in small shuttles through the shattered hull. Entering the fortress's core, the air inside was thick with the hum of alien machines. Strange lights pulsed on walls made of living metal. The Marines moved like shadows, silent and deadly. Suddenly, a surge of energy pulsed through the chamber. The swarm's defenses activated. Robotic arms, energy beams, and swirling drones attacked from every side. The Marines fought back, their movements fast and fluid. They dodged, fired, and charged forward. Each loss was mourned, but no one stopped. Lena's virus program activated from the Valiant. Streaming data through a narrow uplink, the nodes in the chamber began to flicker, sending mixed signals to the swarm. Confusion spread like wildfire. Orders conflicted. Retreat and attack. Split and regroup. The swarm began turning on itself. Outside, the humans watched as the great tide broke. The Orc swarm shattered into pieces. Millions of drones falling silent, drifting aimlessly in the dark. Elias exhaled, voice thick with emotion. We did it. Ria's voice crackled through the comms. They said we were fragile, but where the sting they never saw coming. The UNS Valiant drifted deeper into the shattered remains of the Orcs fortress. Space was thick with debris-twisted metal, shattered drones, and broken fragments of alien technology that once powered the hive. The silence between bursts of battle felt heavy, almost like the calm before a final storm. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge, his face pale under the dim emergency lighting. The ship groaned around him, its hull scarred by countless strikes. The steady hum of the engines masked the tension in the air. Every crew member knew the cost of the fight. Many had fallen already, and more could be lost before this mission was done. Lieutenant Arya Chen scanned the tactical displays. Captain, we've lost 2 frigates. Shields are weakening across the fleet. The nanite clusters are relentless. Elias nodded, his jaw tight. We pushed too far, but we have no choice. This is the only way. Rhea Holt, aboard the lead boarding shuttle, relayed updates from the Marines fighting inside the hive's heart. Her voice was calm but edged with urgency. The enemy's defenses are adapting fast. They've deployed new automated traps and energy fields. Our losses are mounting. Elias clenched his fists. Tell the Marines to hold their ground. We can't afford to retreat now. On the bridge, Leif Anderson's hands moved quickly over the control panels, rerouting power to critical systems. Captain, the aft thrusters took a direct hit. We're losing maneuverability. Keep them online, Elias ordered. Every second counts. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Warning alarms screamed through the corridors as the Valiant rocked under the impact of a massive nanite swarm. The metallic clouds tore through the outer armor, grinding against the hull like a swarm of razor-sharp knives. Elias steadied himself against the console. Damage report. Leif's voice was tense. Hull breaches in sections 7 and 9. Life support fluctuating. A cold wave of fear swept through the bridge crew. Losing life support inside an enemy fortress meant a slow, suffocating death. Seal off those sections immediately, Elias commanded. Prepare emergency oxygen reserves. Outside, the stars looked distant and cold. swallowed by the darkness of the ruined hive. On the ground inside the fortress, Rhea's Marines fought with everything they had. They moved like shadows between twisted corridors, dodging energy beams and slashing through living metal tendrils. Their armor was light, their weapons smaller than those of many alien species. But their speed and determination made them deadly. One Marine, Private Yalan Reyes, stumbled as a pulse of energy scorched the floor beneath him. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward, ignoring the burning pain. "We can't let them stop us," he muttered. "Not now." The Marines reached the control chamber, a vast room glowing with pulsing blue light. The nerve center of the swarm's command nodes lay before them, a tangled web of cables and shimmering cores that hummed like a heartbeat. Lena, Ashford's virus was still transmitting from the Valiant, weaving through the alien systems. The crew watched the data streams flicker, hoping the virus would do its work before the enemy repaired the damage. Inside the chamber, the Marines planted explosive charges designed to destroy the nodes if necessary. Suddenly, the control cores shuddered violently. The virus was taking effect, signals scrambled, commands conflicted. Outside, the swarm's drones faltered, their movements jerky and confused. Some turned on their own, others stopped in mid-flight, but the fortress defenses grew desperate. Energy fields flared, and robotic arms struck out, targeting the Marines relentlessly. Rhea ordered a withdrawal. "Fall back to extraction point. We can't hold the chamber much longer." As the Marines retreated, Elias watched the hull integrity drop dangerously low. "Prepare for emergency warp," he said. "We're leaving the fortress now." The engines roared to life, pushing the ship away from the ruins. Outside, the swarm's energy flares grew dimmer. But the danger was far from over. Elias allowed himself a moment to breathe. The cost had been high, ships lost, brave souls gone, but the mission was a success. The swarm's command center was crippled. He looked around at his crew, faces tired but unbroken. "We're fragile," he said quietly, "but fragile things can survive storms, and sometimes that's all it takes." In the distance, stars shone brighter than ever, silent witnesses to a battle that few had believed humanity could fight. The Un's Valiant limped away from the shattered Orcs fortress, its hull scarred and battered. Outside the viewport, space was calm again, but the silence was heavy with the cost of what had just happened. The crew moved through the dim corridors, their faces a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and sorrow for those lost. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. They had struck a critical blow to the Orc swarm, but the war was far from over. Still, a spark of hope burned brighter than it had in weeks. Lena Ashford, the ship's lead scientist, joined Elias at the command console. Her eyes reflected the flickering holodisplay. "The virus is spreading through the swarm's systems faster than we expected. The hive's nodes are overloaded with conflicting commands." Elias nodded. "So they're turning on themselves." Lena smiled faintly. "Yes, it's chaos inside their ranks. Without centralized control, the swarm is breaking apart." "Rhea," Holt's voice came over the coms, calm but firm. "Marines have withdrawn safely. All personnel accounted for, though we lost many brave souls." Elias closed his eyes briefly, feeling the ache of each loss. They fought like warriors. Fragile, maybe, but fierce. The holomap showed the Orc swarm's form dissolving like mist under the morning sun. The endless tide of silver drones fragmented, directionless, and scattered. Alliance fleets seized the chance, pushing forward with renewed strength. In the days that followed, reports came from many worlds. The Orcs retreated, abandoning systems they had held for months. Planets once doomed were saved. Refugees began to return, their faces lighting with hope. Back on Vrathkal, the council chamber buzzed with new energy. The humans, once sidelined and dismissed, were now the center of attention. Even the Rivak general, who had sneered at them before, nodded with reluctant respect. Elias addressed the gathered delegates, his voice steady but powerful. You called us fragile. You were right. We do break. We do bleed. But our strength is in knowing exactly how much we can lose, and still keep moving forward. A murmur spread through the room. The old prejudices were beginning to crumble. In distant star systems, children of many races learned a new word, a word that meant stubborn, defiant, and impossible to break. That word was human. Lena turned to Elias quietly. They will never forget what we did here. Elias looked out the viewport, stars sparkling like jewels against the black velvet of space. A new chapter had begun, not just for humanity, but for the entire Alliance, and somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The Valiant and her fleet drifted back towards Frathcal, carrying the scars of battle and the weight of victory. The ships moved slowly, battered and worn, their crews tired but alive. The stars outside the viewports were cold and distant. But inside the ships, hope burned like a bright flame. Captain Elias Ward sat quietly in the command chair, watching the stars pass by. The journey home was long and filled with silence, heavy with the memories of those lost and the sacrifices made. Lieutenant Arya Chen entered the bridge, her eyes soft but determined. We did what no one thought possible, she said gently. We fought, and we won. Elias nodded slowly. They said we were too fragile. Maybe they were right. But maybe fragility isn't weakness. Behind them, the crew moved with quiet purpose, cleaning wounds, repairing systems, and comforting one another. The human ships bore the marks of battle scorch marks, dented armor, and flickering lights. Yet their spirit remained unbroken. In the Grand Council chamber of Rathco, the alien delegates awaited their return. The hall was filled with hushed whispers as the humans entered, their faces tired but proud. For once, the usual laughter and doubt were absent. General Cracksdale, the Rivok leader who had once mocked them, stepped forward. His many eyes held something new, a grudging respect. Captain Ward, your fleet has done the impossible. You have saved worlds and given the Alliance new hope. Elias met his gaze steadily. We did what was necessary, not because we are invincible, but because we refuse to give up. Council Leader Vesa, the shimmering Vathri elder, smiled gently. Your courage has changed us all. We see now that strength is not only in power, but in resilience. As the council applauded, Elias felt the weight of their words settle in his chest. This was more than victory, it was recognition. That night, aboard the Valiant, Elias stood alone before the vast window overlooking the molten oceans of Kesher. The red light reflected in his eyes, but his heart was calm. He thought of Earth, of the endless challenges humanity had faced, from storms to wars, from famine to hope. The stars stretched out endlessly before him, a vast universe of possibilities. Somewhere, in the distance, a child of another species would learn a new word that night, a word that meant stubborn, unyielding, and impossible to break. That word was human.